Wednesday night, October 28th, 2020. A few weeks ago, we began a topic regarding Sha'ud Zemaniyot, Rabbenu Tam, Shki'at Hamma, Ben Hashemashot, and it's a topic that has caused a lot of confusion and bewilderment and a lot of fights, unfortunately, because people don't know what's correct, what's incorrect. And we've shown that due to a blatant misunderstanding of Rabbenu Tam, people understood him to mean that there is a second Sheki'ah, a second sunset after the sunset that we already know. And only after that second sunset would Ben Hashemashot come in and would Seta Kochabim come in. And what we've shown through the writings of Rabbi Eliyahu Zaini and Rabbi Yishak Barda is that that's a mistake. And in actuality, what Rabbenu Tam talks about as two different shiki'ahs is not necessarily a two settings of the sun, but the first one is when the sun begins to descend, and the second one is actual sunset. So the first one is really talking about the time that Pereg HaMenha begins, when the sun is beginning to come down and it's at the top of the trees, and then it goes all the way down. And based upon different halachot in the Gemara, in the Rishonim, in Shulchan Aruch, you can see that that's actually the case, and everybody was aware of such a thing. But because of the way Rabbenu Tam wrote it, it was misconstrued and misunderstood, and then people thought that we now have to wait 72, minutes after this other sunset, which obviously doesn't happen. So once we keep this in mind, we have to go back to the actual halakha. And the actual halakha is that you have this period of time that you walk, that it takes a person time to walk, that the stars are supposed to come out. So it's not that Shabbat, for example, ends because you walked 13 and a half minutes or 18 minutes, depending on the way you're calculating it. Basically, if you really read Harambam carefully, I forgot who pointed it out last week. Maybe it was Nisim who pointed it out last week. A careful reading of Harambam would seem that it would be 18 minutes, the Geonim 13 and a half minutes. But it's not about the time period, but it's rather about the stars. The stars being out and actually being able to see those stars. Today, of course, we have something called light pollution. Okay? We are inundated with unnatural lighting, not only in our immediate area, but throughout the world. And it affects what we see up in the skies. Okay? And because of that, we don't really see the stars at the time the stars come out, but we don't see them until much, much later, until the sky gets darker and these stars appear brighter. Fine. Putting this all aside, David Batesh said, well, why can't we calculate it exactly, based upon astronomy the way we know it, and come up with a number? And many people have tried to do that. And over the last 2 weeks that we didn't have class, I delved into this more, looking for it. Not that I haven't in the past, but I said, let me spend a little more time trying to figure it out. And it's not something that's easily calculated. According to science today, there are 3 different twilights, 3 different what we'll call end of day, post sunset. We'll call it 3 different times of Seta Kochabim. They have one they call civil, one astronomical, one nautical, and each one is at a different point. One is at 6 degrees, the sun being 6 degrees below the western horizon, one at 12 degrees below, and one at 18 degrees below. And over the course of time, from our first class on this topic till today, I did all different types of calculations. Calculations for Brooklyn as well as many other cities in the Middle East that we would have a tradition about. Jerusalem, Aleppo, Cairo, Baghdad, and even the city that Rabbenu Tam came from in France, which is called Ramarot. And even based upon that, nothing seems to work with these degrees that today's science considers, when the stars come out. So obviously something is amiss over here. So I recently was able to get a book in English. It's called, plain and simply, Zimanim. And this book, Zimanim, talks about Chief Rabbi Yitzhak Levi Herzog, Chief Rabbi of Eretz Israel. And he was basically trying to convince American Jewry. Okay, so now we're talking about 30s, the 40s. This book was published in 57. And during that time period, he was trying to convince the Jews of America Shabbat does not end at 18 minutes past sunset. The common practice among many American Jews, it seems, was that they were ending Shabbat 18 minutes past sunset. And Rabbi Herzog said this is completely wrong. It's inaccurate. Basically, you think you're keeping Shabbat all day long, only to come be Mehalel Shabbat at the end of the day. And he worked with different rabbis and scientists, people that were well adept in astronomy, to try to calculate this time period. And they came up with a number of when the sun is below the horizon. That is an appropriate time to calculate when Shabbat is over, when the stars come out. And that is 7.083 degrees. Now that 7.083 degrees, because it's degrees, it varies over the course of the year. It's not a steady number. Okay, in the Midrash, in Shara Sion, they do 25 minutes, but in the Dome, they do 35 minutes, but in that minyan down the block over there, they do 40 minutes. It doesn't work upon minutes. You have to actually know what this time is. Now we have our phones. We can look up anything. Everything is much more easily accessible. If you know where to go look for it. I think what happened over time, based upon me crunching the numbers over the course of the last 10 days or so, is that the rabbis of our community, and possibly of many local Ashkenazi communities, looked at this figure given by Rabbi Herzog, and which seems to have been adopted by the Rabbinical Assembly of New York, and they saw that it fluctuated over the course of the year, over a span of time, with approximately 35 minutes being the pinnacle, the latest time that this, that the sun is at that degree of 7.083 degrees below the horizon in the Western Hemisphere, and therefore, or below the Western horizon rather, and based upon that, they told our community, and most probably the neighboring Ashkenazi communities, and most of New York Jewry, that this is the time, 35 minutes after sunset throughout the year. This is what I've surmised so far. The problem is, at that time, based upon this particular book called Zimanim, they considered that civil twilight. And civil twilight today is only considered 6 degrees below the western horizon. To go look for these times, you cannot come up with it. You have to have special apps to find it. And it's not really that hard to do, but it can be done. Problem is, if you keep that idea of civil twilight in your mind, you'll constantly get confused and again be ending Shabbat too early. Now, the question is, what about us as Sephardim? Does this really work for us? Does it not work for us? Is it accurate? Is it inaccurate? Carrie's shaking his head. I don't know why, unless he knows something that he wants to share with us. Carrie, anything?
There was if I remember, there was a problem with Sammy Mizrahi one day when his son was born and born on a Shabbat.
Stop.
Was either
Stop. When a person is born on a Friday night or a Saturday
no,
night.
It was Saturday, and they wanted to know when Shabbat ended and how it ended because he wanted to know if he should make the Milah on a Saturday or the Sunday. They said it
Right.
was
So we're talking about
29
when a
minutes.
person is born Friday night or Saturday night. That time period, that window of Ben Hashemashot is something different. You're not looking at when Shabbat starts or when Shabbat begins. You're looking at a very, very specific window. And if the person is born within that window, let's say it's on a Friday night, let's say the person born on Friday night within that window, that automatically pushes off the Milah to Sunday. If it's on Saturday night within that window, also it will push off the Milah. It changes everything. So if you're looking at that very, very specific window, that's different. It's different than what we're talking about with ending Shabbat. I don't want to confuse things, but just keep that in the back of your minds. All right? Fine. So we as Sephardim, does it work for us? Does it not work for us? I don't have a definite answer as of yet. There are rabbis in Jerusalem till today trying to calculate that, trying to figure it out. And they're all basically working upon the same premise, which is basically what? I'm sorry? Basically on the premise of the Ben Ish Hai. So first I want to look at something that Rabbi Ben Sion Musafi writes in his Shibat Sion, in Halachot Shabbat. And from there, we'll try to go to the Ben Ish Hai and see what he has written over there. So I'm reading from Shibat Sion, Rabbi Ben Sion Musafi, Volume 2. And this has to do with Mosseri Shabbat. And this is his halakha on top. He tells you, מאחרים זמן תפילת ערבית במוצאי שבת לפחות 20 דקות אחר השקיעה. ובקיץ טוב שיאחרו אותה 25 דקות אחר השקיעה. He goes, Saturday night, we delay praying Arbit until at least 20 minutes after sunset. And in the summer months, it's better to delay it up to 25 minutes. And then he goes through his explanations and his sources on the bottom for all that. And then he gets to the time. And he says, وما شكتبتي ש20 דקות אחר השקיעה הוא זמן ערבית במוצאי שבת, כן נהגו ברוב בתי הכנסיות שבירושלים עיר הקודש. He goes, this is the custom in most of the synagogues in Jerusalem. והכי חזיתינו לרבנן כשישאר. And this is what I have seen from many great Hachamim. Haggaon Harab Hiskiya Shabbatai. Rabbi Hiskiya Shabbatai was one of the Hachamim of Halab and later on moved to Yerushalayim. He spent a little time here in Brooklyn, and that's when Knesset Tehon opened up because of his visit, but that's part of history. And then he became known as one of the great Dayanim of Yerushalayim when he moved back there. ועמיתו הגאון רבי סבי פסח Frank, one of the greatest Ashkenazi Hachamim of Yerushalayim, Rabbi Frank, same thing. מורנו ראש הישיבה הגאון רבי עזרא עטיה, Rabbi Musafi is a student of Rabbi Atiyah. He says the Rosh Yeshiva Rabbi Atiyah did the same thing. Rabbi Obadiah Hadaya, same thing. והחשבון פשוט. He goes, and this calculation of 20 minutes is very, very simple. דהרי דעת הרמב"ם בפירוש המשנה Because if you look at the Pirush of Mishnayot of Harambam and Pesachim, he tells you mahalach mil, okay, the time it takes to walk a mil, hushene humshe sha'a, 2/5 of an hour. Dehainu, meaning what? What's 2/5 of an hour? 24 dakot, 24 minutes. V'chen da'at kama meha poskim. This is the opinion of a number of the poskim. Ach da'at roba poskim zema nil hu haydakot. But according to the majority of the poskim, the time to walk the meal is 18 minutes. כמו שכתב מרן בשולחן ערוך, בשולחן ערוך, in Siman Taf Nun Tet, it's 18 minutes. And he writes over there in Shulchan Aruch, לשיעור מיל הווה רביעית שעה וחלק מ-20 מן השעה. עד כאן לשונה. Fine. וכן פסקו רוב ככל האחרונים. And this is the ruling of most of the האחרונים. נמצא לשיטת השולחן ערוך. Based upon this, according to the ruling of Shulchan Aruch, שלושת רבעי מיל הווה י"ג דקות וחצי. 3/4 of a meal is 13.5 minutes, what we know as the Shita of the Geonim. Shita Harambam הווה י"ח דקות. And according to Harambam, it would be 18 minutes. ובדאורייתא אזלינן לחומרה. But when we're dealing with something that's deoraita, and this is Shabbat, so Shabbat is deoraita, we lean towards the humra, to the more stringent opinion. Lahshib yod het dakot, and we take into consideration the 18-minute opinion of Harambam. Vehosef od rega ehad al ibad Rabbi Yosef shehu kedeh mahadah 50 amma, and then we take into that, we add what Rabbi Yosef said in the Gemara, that we have to add another fraction of time that it takes to walk 50 amot. Okay, so another minute for that, that's 19 minutes. So we're at 19 minutes. حبروه وعجلوه ل20 دقات. So they rounded it up to 20 minutes, period. وبما قايس شهيوم أروح والشعور زي بشعور زمنيات. Now he throws us another factor that he didn't mention before. He says, technically, this has to be in sha'od zemaniyot, in variable time. Not in constant time, but variable. And because of that, since the day is longer, obviously this 20-minute now becomes longer. There are those who add another 5 minutes. And his father, who was a big hakam, Rabbi Sulaiman Musafi, did that. He started Arbit 25 minutes after the sunset. And that's what he did anytime he was dealing with Shema of Arbit, Sefirat HaOmer, Bekat al-Libana, the ending of Ta'aniyot. Anything he did 25 minutes. Abal, לגבי עשיית מלאכה, בעינן תוספת שבת קודש, שהוא מדאורייתא. But now to actually do מלאכה on Mosseri Shabbat, we have to have תוספת. We have to add to the Shabbat, because it's דאורייתא. ומוסיפים עוד 10 דקות. And then we add another 10 minutes. Okay, so we're looking at 30 minutes throughout the year, 35 minutes for the summer. Again, that 35-minute time. Remember, Rabbi Kassin came from Yerushalayim. Rabbi Kassin was the brother-in-law of Rabbi Obadiah Hedayah that we mentioned over here. Okay, and he knew these other Hachamim that we mentioned above. Now Rabbi Musafi tells us, look at the Ben Ish Hai. Ve'ayin be Ben Ish Hai, Shana Rishuna. So I'm going to pull up Ben Ish Hai, 1 second. So there's Ben Ish Hai, year 1, Parashat Vayakhel. Parashat Vayakhel, Ot Dalet.
Did I interrupt you a second?
Please do.
If you're in different parts of the world, doesn't the sun set differently in different parts of the world?
Absolutely.
New York is different than Jerusalem?
Absolutely
So?
is different. Yes. I'm getting to that. 1 second. Okay?
Okay. Got it.
I agree with you 1,000,000%. I used to not agree with that, but as I said, the more I've looked into this topic, it's foolish not to agree to that. Okay, so what does the Ben Ish Hai say over here in Parashat Vayakil? He says, "Sha'ot elu shel shesh u'mechesa או 9 ומחסה נקראים שעות זמניות. يعادم شعريوتا לפי עניין היום, מה רוכבים קסדה מחלקים היום 12 חלקים. בכל מקום ששערו החכמים לכלל ברכה בשעות, משערים בשעות אלו הן שהן זמניות. ויש שערים מעמוד השער של הכוכבים, ויש משום חמד שתייתה, וסברה ראשונה עיקר, דחשרן לחומרה לשער מעמוד השער של הכוכבים. So Ben Ish Hai is talking about, that there is a concept of sha'ot zemaniyot to figure things out, and how you figure them out. Either you're doing a period of time that's from dawn to twilight, or you're doing a period of time that's from sunrise to sunset. Fine. וכן המנהג פשוט פה עירנו בגדד לשער מעמוד השחר על הסד הכוכבים. And the common custom here in our city of Baghdad is to calculate it from dawn till the stars come out. Ki eslenu hoshbim set kochabim. Now he's telling you when set kochabim is in Baghdad, and he's not telling you based upon summer or winter. He's just telling you when set kochabim is in Baghdad. That it's shelish sha'a ahar kiriat hamaghrib be'ir zo. It is a third of an hour, 20 minutes after the calling of the Maghrib. Okay, that's when they go up to the mosque to call out for the evening prayer. Now, the general term Maghrib means sunset, but we'll show it's not exactly sunset in a second. וכך קיבלו לשער בזה מן עתיר ראשי הרב הגדול מול זקני רבנו משה חיים, etc. Okay. So he's saying that this has been the custom here, at least since the time of my grandfather, that Siddiq al-Khabim is 20 minutes after the Maghrib. Go back to Rabbi Musafi. He tells you, see the Ben Ish Hai shekatab, Dizman ben Hashemashot hu 20 dakot ahar kriyat ha-Maghrib. It's 20 minutes after the Maghrib. ונודע, and it's known, שקריאת המגרב בבגדד הוא כשבע דקות אחר השקיעה. The Maghrib, the sunset call to prayer in Baghdad, is 7 minutes after actual sunset. Okay? שכתב שם שתפילת ערבית הוא שליש שעה מהשקיעה. So 7 minutes plus the 20 minutes, 27 minutes until things are over. So they rounded it to 30 minutes. That's what he's telling you. And he feels that the 27 minutes of Baghdad is equivalent to 30 minutes in Jerusalem, time-wise, to make up for that difference in time. Now, is this accurate? Is it inaccurate? And that's what I've been trying to figure out with my numerous calculations. And it's very hard to come up with a number. So based upon what we talked about a few minutes ago about a 6-degree civil twilight, I looked at the 4 times of the year that we have an equinox, a solstice. And for Baghdad, those times would be at the 6-degree mark. In March, 24 minutes after sunset. In June, 29 minutes after. In September, 25 minutes after. And in December, 28 minutes after. So, does it work more or less with what the Ben Ish Hai says? Technically, yes. Because according to the Ben Ish Hai, it's 20 minutes after the Maghrib. And their Maghrib is 7 minutes, so it's 27 minutes. And we looked at 24, 29, 25, and 28. It's very close to the 27-minute mark. So, if we're looking at 6, that's based upon the 6-degree mark. That same 6-degree mark for Jerusalem would be 25, 28, 24, 27. what Rabbi Mosseri is giving us is longer than that. So once again, something's not working over here. So we need to get an exact set of degrees. And that's what I'm having a hard time calculating. But, so there's another way of calculating. And it gets confusing. I don't have it handy for you to see. There is, one second. Where is it? Zeman Seta Kochabim. All right. I should take copies of these pictures. All right. Feel free to jump in and say anything while I'm looking.
What would these calculations be for New York?
What would these calculations be for New York on a 6 degree below the western horizon? We're looking at 27, 33, 27, and 31. 33 being the greatest one. Okay, and that's in June. But again, that is based upon 6 degrees. It doesn't seem that anybody really thinks that 6 degrees is a time that we can see stars, even if we had no light pollution. And that's what I tried to find out. I emailed different people within the Naval Observatory and stuff like that. And they said, if you're out at sea, it's possible. Okay. But we're talking about if you're really out at sea, because that's where you have the least light pollution. But even then, it's not easy to determine which stars you're seeing. And then we have another factor. So the factor of medium stars, small stars, and stars that are together. Okay? It's hard. You know what? Let me make copies of this and send it as a PDF. We could try to read this together. Give me 1 second. So Solomon, Batesh, where'd you go?
People are on mute, so you gotta give them a second.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Okay. So now, what do you recall when you were younger? Other than 25 minutes in the Midrash and 35 minutes in the Dome.
I remember 18 minutes at the Greek shul on 60th Street.
Okay.
That's it. That was the earliest I've ever seen. But it was, I always knew that it was 20 minutes in Jerusalem and 25 minutes in New York. But am I still there?
Yes, we heard you, Solomon.
Oh, it looked like you froze. Okay.
Joey froze. Joey's frozen.
Okay, Joe. Oh, that's what it is. Should we wait
Joey's
for him?
frozen.
Gotcha.
What's up,
Do you remember
David?
that? Do you remember the Greek shul, Carrie?
Yeah, the one on 60th Street.
The one on
60,
65th Street. 65th Street.
65th Street over there. I remember it. That was David Angel's shul, I think. He
Well,
was
I
there.
was there before
the
David
beginning.
Angel when it was a real Greek shul.
Yeah. I remember. I never went there, though. I know what it is. I know who it was, but I don't remember.
No,
I
I didn't
never
know there
went.
was a difference between Greeks and Turks and different Greeks,
Yep.
Nikis and
Hello,
Mhm.
everybody. I don't know what happened. Mike,
You didn't pay your bill, Joey. That's all.
yeah, right? I don't know. Solomon said 18 minutes at the Greek shul, and then my computer just died.
yeah, I know because I didn't want you to hear that. No, I
It was
always
Greek. That's
remember.
why. It's Greek.
I remember
It was
20
Greek.
minutes. By the way, 20 minutes in Yerushalayim, 20 minutes in Halab, But some say that it was 25 minutes in Halab.
I
Oh.
never heard 20 minutes in Halab. 25 minutes, I've definitely heard from everybody.
Okay, I've heard 20, but that may have been old days. But you know, Shanaim, I always was 20 minutes.
20 minutes, and they started Arbit.
Right.
Okay, but what about ending?
You know something? They always ended late. It didn't matter. You know
Right.
that.
I know that. There were no rush to finish.
You see, I did once sit outside in Long Branch when it was pretty dark, and I did look to see 3 medium stars, and I found it to be exactly 35 minutes to the second.
Okay.
But then again, like you said, the light situation.
Right.
But the number 35 was exact.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, but then again, you know, it's not a scientific proven thing.
No, it's not a scientific proven thing, but I also remember when we were kids, if you didn't know what time, you go outside and look for the stars.
Right.
And when
My
you-
grandmother always said 3
and when you-
stars. That's it.
And once you saw the 3 stars, you knew Shabbat was over.
Exactly.
It
But
didn't make
Unless it was cloudy.
right.
well,
Mom, but the point was it didn't make a difference what time the calendar said or what time anybody said. You looked for the stars.
we went outside. Well, usually in the summertime, we'd go outside, look outside. Shabbat is over.
Right.
Winter, different story. You know, weather-wise and clouds.
Cloud, snow, rain, I got you.
We didn't. You know what? Basically, they didn't care what time it was. They just wanted to see the stars.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't. I mean, listen. Not everybody had clocks 200 years ago. What did they do?
Nobody had clocks 200 years ago.
Okay, so what they do?
It was all based upon the stars.
Or the Muslim prayer? I mean, come on. It was based upon the stars.
Right. I agree. It was based upon the stars.
So time, I guess today, scientifically, we could figure it out to the second.
We should be able to.
I don't know why we don't.
It doesn't seem that they can for some reason. What's considered a star? A lot of things that we think of there as stars are really planets.
Okay, there's basically one is a planet. That's it.
No.
You look down south in the southwest, you see a big star, which is a planet. I don't know which one it is even.
I believe it's Venus, but I'm not positive.
So, but that's
I
it.
think it's Jupiter. We've been tracking it. It's south.
Okay, it's Jupiter.
I think so.
I don't know down here. I can't tell those things here.
Different times of years, you can see different planets in the sky. Mars, we saw last month. You can see Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus at different times of year.
Barry, you have that app on your phone, I think, right?
Yeah, but we're not. We're not supposed to know that. To us, they're all stars. No.
No. You can actually tell the difference, not to get too far into it, but a star twinkles. A planet is very bright and it doesn't twinkle. It doesn't flicker. It's like a constant light.
I know, but to the common person, when you see something up there, it's a star.
It's a star.
Nah, I don't know about that one.
Well,
But it's
if
not.
you have any intelligence, it's not a star. And basically that one that you see up there in the north, in the south, actually, it does not twinkle. It's just a bright planet.
Okay.
So, but
But
that's,
but I understand what Nisim's saying. Nisim is saying that if you think about what we refer to things as abudat kochabim umazalot, okay, people are worshiping what kochabim, stars, and mazalot, constellations, okay, the constellations. We don't talk about planets for some reason. The concept of planets never really comes up in Judaism, but planets are definitely known because we have names for a number of the planets. But the sun is considered a planet among, the counting. So it's very, very different. The way modern science looks at things and how, we'll call it Judaism looks at it, how Torah looks at it, how the Hachamim rather looked at it, they had different names, obviously, and we know that we're supposed to follow, the modern science based upon what Harambam says. So we know today that, there's a difference between a star and a planet, like Barry was explaining. That's all it is. Correct?
So the bottom line is, with science, we should know exactly, precisely when Shabbat is over,
We should.
and we don't. But we don't.
Right. So
We know when we have to put a leap year because of the extra minutes, but we don't know how to calculate.
So that's what I said. So based upon what we know from Rabbi Herzog and the other rabbis and scientists, his number came out to 7.083 degrees below the western horizon.
Okay, that's French to me,
Okay,
and
French,
to most people.
but that's science. You said, what does science tell
Right.
us?
Okay.
So science is not telling us this. The rabbis working with science are telling us this. That's what I'm saying.
You mentioned 6 degrees.
Right. So I mentioned that if you go online today, any place online, and look up what time is twilight, okay, there are 3 different twilights. Okay, none of them which are 7.083. It's either 6 degrees, 12 degrees, or 18 degrees. Now, if you're going to wait for 18 degrees when it's really dark outside, you're really not ending Shabbat till very late. You're looking at, for Brooklyn, you're looking anywhere from 91 minutes up to 126 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. But by that time, nobody could tell you it's not Vaday Laila. It is black outside. Okay, and you could see stars and you can do whatever you want. But are we waiting that long? We're not waiting that long. Nobody could tolerate waiting that long. In our minds, we know Shabbat ends earlier than that. If we're looking at, that's the 18 degree. If we're looking at the 12 degree for Brooklyn, you're looking at anywhere from 59 minutes up to 76 minutes.
But nothing according to Rabbenu Tam 72.
No. And now, even if we go to Rabbenu Tam's hometown, okay, even there's no 72.
Right.
Okay. So 72, to do the 72-minute thing really seems to be, without offending anybody, a mistake.
Joey, I wasn't here for the beginning of the class. Does this all preface on Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker? Is that the whole premise?
I'm sorry.
Like, in other words, what are we going by? Okay, when we were kids, we said 3 stars and the moon doesn't count and all that. But in the Torah, it says Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker. That was the meaning of a day. No?
I'm really not following, Dave. I'm sorry.
So in other words, we're waiting for Erev. We're waiting for Erev for the next day to start. So we're waiting. What is the whole question is, what is Erev?
No.
When it's sundown. When is Shabbat over?
Right. When is Shabbat over? So Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker, Yom Echad, Yom Sheni.
There's nothing to do with it. But nobody.
Why not?
Why
it's
yes?
over in the book, kid.
Why yes?
Because what are we exactly trying to figure out? When the day ends and when the day begins?
No, we want to know when the stars come out.
Why? Wait. Why is that the question?
That's the determining factor for when Shabbat ends.
But where does it say that in the Torah? I'm just wondering.
Most of Torah is Torah sheba'al peh, not Torah shebichtab. So most of Torah does not come out of the written Bible. You may have hints to things or pisukim where a mizvah can be learnt from or learnt through, but not written out explicitly. In other words, that your tefillin have black straps on them. Does it tell you any place in the Torah? In the Torah
Nowhere.
that we're talking about, Torah Shebechtab? Of course
No,
not.
nowhere.
But we have Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Sheba'al Peh tells us that they have to be black. The Torah Sheba'al Peh tells us that they have to be square. The Torah have to be, they can't be rounded. Torah Sheba'al Peh tells us what Totafot bin Ainecha means, that it's not placed between the eye, okay? In other words, not over here, okay, but rather up here, okay? All the different things that we know about the Mizvot are all through Torah Sheba'al Peh. Halakha
Okay.
Moshe Sinai, not written in Torah Shebechtab. The Karaim, all right, the Karaites, they follow exclusively what is written in Torah Shebechtab, in the written law, in the Torah that we read, B'sibur on Shabbat, for example. But we do not, create halachot based upon what's in Torah Shebechtab.
Okay, but right now we're trying to figure out when Shabbat begins and ends. So
No.
Shabbat is
We're only trying to figure out when it ends based upon the ruling that it ends at Set HaKochabim, which is when the stars come out.
understood.
Which we still cannot figure out.
No, we cannot figure it out.
Right.
I cannot figure it out, I should say. Okay, but we can figure out based upon what we started studying in the previous class is that the concept that people understood Rabbenu Tam to say that Shabbat ends 72 minutes after sunset is imprecise and incorrect. And it is something that was unknown in the Sephardic and even most of the Ashkenaz world until approximately 40 or so years ago, when Hacham Ovadia Yosef, started to make it a popular thing based upon his reading of Shulchan Aruch.
Joey, I have to differ with you. I will tell you about 50 years ago, Rabbi Rosenfeld introduced it into our community.
I didn't say it was not known at all, but it was not popularly known. I'll rephrase myself. That Rabbi Rosenfeld introduced it. Rabbi Rosenfeld, you have to understand, I said Ashkenazim. I specifically said Ashkenazim. I was leaving out Hasidim. Hasidim, completely different thing. I should have said Mitnagdim instead of saying Ashkenazim. Okay, but since you brought it up, the Hasidim did follow the 72 minutes. And since Rabbi Rosenfeld was a Breslov Hasid, obviously he did 72 minutes, and that's what he taught. There's no question about that. Okay, but this is definitely amongst the Sephardim, it was definitely unknown. You may have had a few Hachamim that privately adhered to 72 minutes, but it wasn't something that they even told their families about. Okay, it was done in a very private way. But in approximately the last 40 or so years, Hacham Ovadia Yosef, in all his writings, has definitely, pushed for 72 minutes, and all Shas people today in Israel basically follow 72 minutes. Shas schools, Shas synagogues,
what?
That's what they do.
Based on what?
Based on, you got to go back and listen to the last class to understand how he's reading Shulchan Aruch. Okay, that's really what it's based upon. But here we saw even the Ben Ish Hai, who we consider a mahmir in many cases, even he is not bringing the 72 minutes. Okay. So now,
Joey.
Yeah.
Hacham Ovadia also, I once read a Teshuvah. He was very into just Tosefet Shabbat. Of course, he's very strict on everyone should do 72 minutes, but he also always said everyone should add a few minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. We should be sad when Shabbat is ending, and our neshama. He gave a whole different part of the reason we smell the Bisamim and Havdalah. So he was more makpid on just adding a few minutes. So whenever you want to finish it, add 4 or 5 minutes. He was. I remember him talking about a lot about the concept of Tosefet Shabbat. Just adding a
Okay.
few minutes to what you regularly would end. You familiar with any of that?
The concept of Tosefet Shabbat technically is 1 minute, and we've had a class in the past where we touched upon that. It does not need to be more than 1 minute. What you're talking about seems to be more like a type of class he may have given to Ba'alei Teshuvah type of thing to try to get them to cling, to Shabbat and to Judaism. That's what it sounds more like than the typical Hacham Yosef, where he talks about, very cut and dry halakha. But since I didn't hear the class, I can't comment more than
No,
that.
cut and dry, like you said. He's very makpid. You should follow Rabbenu Tam 72 minutes.
Right.
If you can't, go as late as you can. That was what I remember him always, obviously he doesn't really get into the minimums. Is it 25? Is it 35? He doesn't, I don't at least remember seeing it like that.
Right. So he does get into that in earlier Teshuvot. He gets into
Right.
the minimums, and we've done some of those over here. Barry can attest to that. Okay. So it's definitely something that he changed in later years. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
In earlier years, he was not into the whole 72-minute thing. It's something they came up with later, but that later is already 40 years ago. Okay.
Right.
Maybe more.
Oh, the later was 40 years ago in the 80s.
In
70s,
the-
right.
In other words, late 70s, early 80s, that's when he started getting into the Rabbenu Tam. Prior to that, in the 60s,
Right.
you never heard anything about the Rabbenu Tam from him.
Right.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
All right. Does everybody have the PDF that I sent?
Joy, one quick question.
Yes, Barry.
Before we get there, is so the 7 point whatever degrees, Rabbi Herzog,
7.083.
yes, thank you, 7.083, that Rabbi Herzog is talking about, is that those degrees map to when the stars come out, or 3 medium-sized stars? Is that what he was
Well,
saying?
that's what I'm still working on.
I see.
I'm not able to get exact charts and times for that because they're not online. We're still working on getting that.
So does he give a reason why he selected 7 point?
Well, he didn't select that. He was working with the concept of the stars, and the rabbis who had degrees in astronomy that he was working with, they came up with that number based upon the stars.
Okay, got it.
Okay? But it seems that they were working in Jerusalem and possibly in Europe. Okay, so we need to compare that number, as well to the Middle East and see if it really matches up with Jerusalem as we know it. And then from there, we could match it up with other cities in the Middle East. And if we know it works in that concept, we know how it works throughout the world as well. But like I said, I've been tracking the times and looking at the 7.083 time over the course of the year, and it seems to work pretty much in hand with our standard 35 minutes. Okay, like I said, I think that what Rabbi Kassin and the numerous Ashkenazi rabbis here in New York did, they adopted what Rabbi Herzog told them to do, and they looked at the calendar throughout the course of the year, and they said they can't tell people, we're going to look, to calculate it each time. Let's find the latest time that it happens over the course of the year. It ended up being 35 minutes after sunset. And so here's a blanket rule for everybody, 35 minutes after sunset. That is what I think happened. But I don't have any concrete proof to say that. Now, that being the case, we need to figure out why Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, says otherwise. He has a preference of 50 minutes. And then if you need to be a little more lenient, he tells you 41, 42 minutes. Okay. I don't have answers to the questions yet. If anybody here has access to, to information that could help us understand it, please go, find it for us and share it with us. Okay. Okay. So now I sent over a PDF.
Okay, tell me why. Wait. Okay,
What?
I want to know why when you take, let's say, Mag and David's calendar, they're showing 42 minutes. Who are
I
they
don't know.
basing it on?
I don't have Mag and David's calendar in my hand to tell you what they have there.
Chacham Baruch,
Shadeh Sion, 42 minutes.
Chacham Baruch, when he became the rabbi in Shadeh Zion in the late 90s, he said 42 minutes. Why he said it then and not before, I have no idea. But I know that's what the shul followed from maybe 1996 or something.
All right. I never even heard that the dome changed from 35 minutes. I'm still living in the past where the dome is 35 minutes, the midrash is 25 minutes. As far as I'm
42 minutes.
concerned,
No, today everyone's 42 in the shul, I'm saying, in the Shadeh Zion.
In all the shuls, except for, the old timers.
Sephardic is 35, Ahaba is 40, Bet Torah is 40. I don't know anybody that's doing 42. Anybody besides Shadeh Zion that's doing 42, Joe?
Well, he said Mag and David shul, maybe Mag and David synagogue, maybe they go by Shadeh Zion.
Mag and David calendar has
maybe
nothing.
40, maybe
Listen,
40.
guys. The Mag and David calendar has nothing to do with the Mag and David synagogue. The Mag and David calendar is the Mag and David school. Two separate entities. Now, until a few years ago, okay, the person who was in charge of the Mag and David calendar used to call me to get the times to put into the calendar. And trust me, it was not 42 minutes that I was giving them. So that person is no longer at Mag and David. She no longer works there. So I don't know.
Candle lighting was 18 minutes?
I'm sorry?
Was the candle lighting 18 minutes?
Candle lighting, according to me, is always 20 minutes. That is the real minhag. And I clearly remember when I was younger, okay, I'm talking about close to 50 years ago, Mag and David used to put out the times as 50 minutes, as 20 minutes as well.
Okay, and I remember, Joey, you telling me that Shabbat starts exactly when Shabbat starts. No 18, no 20, no 5.
Correct. That's correct. Absolutely
Okay.
correct.
So what is this candle lighting?
The candle lighting, if you will, it's part of the Tosefet that Joey was talking about before. We do Tosefet before Shabbat, not just after Shabbat. And basically what it is the same way we calculate a period of time after Shabbat, like we showed Harambam, we showed 19 minutes, when it's rounded to 20, it's the same thing before Shabbat to welcome in the Shabbat and prepare for the Shabbat so we don't overstep the boundary. That's all it's for, but it doesn't have to be 20 minutes. In other words, a woman knows she's running late, she can light before and she's not accepting Shabbat with lighting, and she can keep doing what she has to do until a couple of seconds before sunset technically, or she could just not light until she gets closer to sunset because she's not able to. That's all it is.
Gotcha.
Nothing more, nothing less. So, Solomon, do you have that Mag and David calendar to make sure of the time?
Yeah, I guess so. I'll go get it.
Get it. Let's make sure. All right, so now
Continue.
Joey,
I'll look it up.
I will. Joey,
Yeah.
you were saying that Chacham Baruch made it 42 minutes. Do we have this in writing any place? Did you have did he issue a statement to the board or anything? Just wondering.
I don't know if I could find it in writing, but I could look, I could try.
I'd be interested to see. Maybe he brings, a source or a reason. That's why I'm asking. That's the only reason I want to know. Even if you ask his son, ask Yaakov.
Yeah, so he told me, he was the one I spoke to about it. He said that he told him to do 42 minutes, and then every minyan started to follow. When he became the rabbi Ben Shadeh Zion, it was the same timing. maybe a year or two apart from when Chacham Baruch was the rabbi of the shul. So I'll get more
Okay, you're-
information.
Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So let's take this week's Shabbat.
Okay, so you're
Shabbat
looking at
starts
Friday,
at
October
5,
30th.
October 30th, Shabbat. Candle lighting is 5:35.
Okay, it should be 5:34 because Shekiah is 5:54.
Okay, and 6:32 Shabbat ends.
6:32 Shabbat ends. That's 40 minutes as per what do you call it? The 40-minute thing.
Okay, 40 minutes.
That's 40
I guess
minutes. Right, they're doing 40 minutes. Ateret is doing 40 minutes as well. Well, Ateret started doing 40 minutes, and they, about 3 years ago, they changed it to 50 minutes.
They're 50 minutes, I think.
There are 50 minutes now, yes. With many
Yeah.
people there obviously going to the 72 and more.
Right.
But they were doing 40 minutes
what-
for quite some time. And a few years ago they moved it up to 50. Okay, so but the calendar
What
has
is 50?
40 minutes. I'm sorry?
What is 50? Just to keep
Rabbi
them in
Moshe
shul
Feinstein.
longer?
Rabbi Moshe Feinstein.
Moshe Feinstein's 50 minutes. Most of the Ashkenazim in
What
Brooklyn
does that
follow
have
that.
to do with separatism?
It doesn't. That's our problem. That's what we're trying to figure out. What are all these
But he's
different times and why?
No, it's not Rabbi Moshe Feinstein because they don't follow him at all anymore. They don't read his books. He's a has-been. He's just not. You know that.
Listen, I wouldn't call him a has-been. It's a little extreme. But
I think the only one that still reads is Rabbi Shammah. Still will read and quote him.
Rabbi Shammah definitely reads Grot Moshe and quotes him, of course. I wouldn't say that nobody in Ateret reads and quotes him, but it's, because he's not a contemporary, okay, they like to be more involved with the living,
Right.
with the deceased. That's what it is. I really believe so. But the thing is, Ateret, if we're talking about Ateret is usually more in sync with the Agudah. So what's the Agudah doing? Are they doing 50 minutes?
The Agudah, from what I understand, goes by Rav Moshe Feinstein.
Okay, so there's your answer. If that's the case.
I mean, could you find some that don't? But I think for the most part, they go by him.
Of course. Of course. The question is, do they still have their allegiance to, the Piskei Halakha of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein or not? If they
Right.
do, then they're going to follow him. If they don't, that's a whole different story. I don't know who's the main posek of the Agudah today.
Well, his son is one of the main ones,
Rabbi David.
Yes.
All right, so there you go. So there's your answer. So they're still
Right.
following Rabbi Feinstein. If they're following Rabbi David Feinstein, that means that's as if they're following Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. It's the same head. Absolutely same mindset. Okay, so they're not really deviating. So if anything, Solomon, they got closer to the Agudah, and that's why they moved from 40 to 50.
Okay, but his name I haven't heard his name in 20 years. I'm
You
saying
should-
outside.
I'm saying, ask your nephew.
Okay, we'll do
They
that.
will be able to tell you more. All right, can we look at this document that I just sent pictures of? Does everybody have it, David? David Batesh is still with us? Everybody has it. Okay. So there is a calendar in the Siddur of Rabbi Tufik. Rabbi Tufik is known as one of the Haredi rabbis, if you will, of Yerushalayim. He's a son-in-law, if I'm not mistaken, of Rabbi Mosseri. And he tends to butt heads a lot with Hacham Ovadia Yosef. Okay? If I'm mistaken, I apologize, but I'm pretty sure this is the same Rabbi Tufik, or maybe it's his brother. Anyway, he has a Siddur, and in the back of his Siddur, he has a calendar of all the different times where he explains all the different times and what they are and how they're calculated and what the sources are. So now we're looking at page 809 of the Sidur, where he talks about Zeman, Seta Kokhabim, Benonim, Uktanim. Okay, the time that the stars come out, the small stars and the medium stars. And we start. Hagam Shehuskar Begimara. محد جيساد شلو شارب عميل ذا حرشك ياه بالليلة لربي يهودا بكتاب شام هروش شل ربي يوسي تاريخ لوصيف عود مهلات ممتد أما شزي هو عود كحسيد قا مسخ كل يود دال دقين زماني يود لحرشك ياه بالليلة يقول مكوم ميدخ جيساه وسكر شام كوخاب ألف يوم بيت بين الشماشوت جيمل هيفي ليلة فيلو جدوليم هنالين بيوم فيلو كتنيم هنالين بالليلة إلا بنونيم. So it's the first thing that we have is the Gemara. The Gemara tells us that two factors for calculating the end of Shabbat, or when is nighttime, if you will. You have 3/4 of a meal after the Shekiyah is considered Laila, and that's according to the Bihuda. The Rosh comes and adds that according to the Biyoseh, you have to add the amount of time that it takes to walk another 49 or 50 amma, as we saw in Rabbi Musafi's writing, and which is about another half a minute or so. And therefore that works out to that amount of time, and then you know when you have nighttime. But on the other hand, the Gemara on the next page tells you when you see one star, you know it's daytime. 2 stars, it's bin Hashem Ashot. Okay? 3 stars, Heve Laila, it's nighttime. And the stars can be not Gidulim, the large stars that you could see during the day, and not the small ones that you only see when it's really dark at night. Ella Benunim, they have to be medium-sized stars. וכל הפוסקים כתבו שלילה הווה על ידי 3 כוכבים דווקא, ולא סגה ב3 רבעי מיל. And as we mentioned earlier, all the poskim write, to know when it is really Laila, when it's nighttime, you must have 3 stars, and it is not sufficient to only know that you were able to travel the amount of 3/4 of a meal. Plain and simple. So you have 3/4 of a meal is generally the amount of time it takes you until you see the stars. But unless you see the stars, it is not night yet. You must see the stars.
That's about 18 minutes, according to the Gemara, right?
Again, but you have to see the stars.
Fine, and if you see the stars after 18 minutes, Shabbat
That's
is
right.
over.
Yes, if you see them.
Okay, if you see them.
Yes.
So if you're in a forest somewhere that you could see the sky, you may see it. If
Again,
there's no lights.
so let's go
Wait,
back.
what is halakhic Seta Kochavim? 18 minutes.
No, halakhic Seta Kochavim does not have a time.
You to walk 3/4 of a meal.
3/4 of a meal, based upon all the different factors that you may have. It could be just 13.5 minutes. It could be 18 minutes. It could be someplace in between. It could be 24 minutes. You don't know.
But the Gemara says it's 18 minutes.
The Gemara does not tell you a time, Solomon. The Gemara does not give you a time.
It says 3/4 of a meal, which is 18 minutes. Correct?
No. According to the Hachamim, according to the poskim that come after the Gemara, they give us times based upon their calculations. I'm not telling you that the time is correct or the time is incorrect, but it is not a set time. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
I was in my mind, I was under the impression that the Gemara said 18 minutes. No, they're saying 3/4 of a meal. Okay, got it.
The amount of time it takes to walk 3/4 of a meal. That is what the Gemara is telling you. But that time alone is not enough. You must still see 3 stars. Until you see the 3 stars, it's not night yet.
But Joey, what if it's a lot of times, even here, you can't see 3 stars in a cloudy night, a rainy night, which happens all the time.
Barry, you have to understand that when people lived in a society where they were used to looking at stars, they knew, okay, night after night after night, where to look in the sky, approximately how much time until they could start seeing something. They knew that if a certain amount of time passed, after they walked, and they still didn't see the skies, and they know they're not going to see the stars because it's so cloudy. They know that after, let's say, half hour or 45 minutes or an hour and a half, they know that enough time has elapsed that obviously the stars are there. So we're not part of a society that's used to looking at stars. You have to keep that in mind as well. You have to be realistic.
Okay, yeah.
Right or wrong?
Yeah.
When's the last time you went looking for stars?
It's only the summertime when we spend more time outdoors.
Okay.
Us every Saturday night we actually do it still.
Okay. I never look for stars ever. Oh, except winter vacation in the Caribbean. That's when I look for the stars to see when it ends. And most of the time, even over there closer to the equator where the sky is clear, usually tends to be almost 40 minutes after sunset until I see them. Okay.
You know what? How about the Gemara's sunset could be later than our sunset of today also? There's like you said, there's different levels of sunset. Which one are they relying on?
No, sunset is very, very clear. Sunset is sunset. There is no question about when sunset is, Solomon. The only time you have a question about sunset is when you're at a very high elevation, when you're on a mountain. Okay, so in Yerushalayim, till today there are arguments as to what time sunset is. And it's a difference of all of 5 minutes based upon
But there's the beginning of sunset and there's the later end, like you said before, over the trees, and there's different levels.
No, but if you look throughout halakha, and again, and I've looked for this throughout Gemara, throughout Harambam, throughout Shulchan Aruch, you could tell from what they're writing that the sunset they're referring to is the same sunset that we're referring to. There is no difference. I hear where you're coming from, but it's inaccurate. It really is inaccurate because it's very, very clear what sunset is. Sunset is something that has been known to mankind, over the course of millennium. There's no question over that.
Right.
Okay, let's get back to the text. I'm going to skip what's in the small print, unless you think that we need to go back to it. We'll come back to it. I'll just stick to the large print for now. Okay, so we're jumping down about 10 lines. Okay. בעל כורחנו, כוונת הגמרא, דבעינן, תרתי, כדי שיהיה לילה, גם 3 רבעי מיל, וגם כוכבים. ונפקא מינה, במקום שיהיה 3 כוכבים קודם 3 רבעי מיל, וכן אפקה, דינה מהנה. באף לרבנו תם שמסליף 4 מילים, יש אומרים שאם אין עדיין כוכבים, אין לעשות מלאכה דבעינן תרתי. So he's just stressing the fact that you must have both conditions. The time to walk the 13 and a half, as well as seeing the stars. But he's adding, even if you're of the opinion that you're following Rabbenu Tam, and it's not 3 3/4 of a meal, but it's rather 4 meal. Okay? So you're talking about 58 minutes or so. Okay, even so, if you walk that entire 58 minute or that 4 meals and you still didn't see stars, it's still no good because you must have both conditions for it to be met to say that it's Laila. ויש אומרים שמודה שכשיהיה שלושה כוכבים הווה לילה. But there is an opinion among the Rishonim that if you just see the 3 stars, you know automatically that 13 and a half minute, we're calling it 13 and a half minutes, but it's not fair. It's really 3/4 of a meal. You know, 3/4 of a meal definitely has passed you. فعلى كل פנים, הדבר ברור לכל העלמא, והכל תלוי בכוכבים. So in the parentheses, what we didn't read, he brought us an argument where people talk about that you have to have both conditions or not. And the end, his conclusion is, and this is the conclusion of the overwhelming majority of the poskim, that you must have stars. Without the stars, nothing counts. Now he moves forward. We have 3 different types of stars that we're talking about. First one is kochabim benoniyim, medium-sized stars. כוכבים בינוניים זהו נקרא לילה ודאי, מדינה. As far as the deen is concerned, once you have 3 medium stars, this is considered for sure nighttime. ובמילי דרבנן, אז דינן בתר כוכבים בינוניים, וכגון מוסאי תענית, שאין לאכול עד שיראו ג' כוכבים בינוניים. And this is what we follow for issues that are dirabbanan, such as ending of a fast. Okay, and he's talking about a fast. Let's say like Som Gedalia, for example. So you need 3 medium stars to end the fast. V'chen b'dikat hames, checking for the hames, sefirat ha'omer, etc. Hadlakat nirot Hanukkah, kriyat Megillah, v'chen hu le'anyan b'kat lebana, v'tibilat nashim. Okay, all these different things, all these you all need to wait until you have 3 medium stars. בשעון מילד רבנן דכולהו זמנן בשלושה כוכבים בינוניים וכן תינוק הנולד בערב שבת, carry what we talked about before, when you have a boy that was born on Erev Shabbat after 3 stars. Okay, 3 medium stars. Since from the deen, this is now technically Laila Vaday, surely night. Nimol beyond Shabbat Kodesh. He would definitely have the Milah on Shabbat itself. So let's say it's now Friday night, 20 minutes, okay, after sunset. And you definitely have the stars out based upon Solomon telling us that the stars are definitely out at 18 minutes, for example. So now at 20 minutes, this child is born. So this child would then be considered as if he was born on Shabbat, and the Milah would be on Shabbat. Even though we technically are waiting longer on Saturday night to end Shabbat. Okay, but we're following the Ikar Hadin. What is the deen? 3 medium stars. נימו ביום שבת קודש, אבל קודם שלושה כוכבים בינוניים, נימו ביום ראשון. But if he was born before these 3 medium stars came out, so prior to the 18-minute mark, then that's considered quasi day, quasi night, okay? It's neither here nor there, and therefore the milah wouldn't be until Sunday. And we're going to explain more as we move forward. So far it's clear. Section 2, it tells you כוכבים קטנים, small stars. הגם שמדינה בינוניים בלילה וכדי לעיין מכל מקום בלילה וראיתה הצליחו החכמים לכתחילה כוכבים קטנים. Now, even though, as we said, as far as the deen is concerned, 3 medium stars is enough, the rabbis say that's great for issues that are d'Rabbanan. But if we have an issue that's de'oraita, okay, issue de'oraita, we now have to be more stringent and we have to have 3 small stars. Lechatahillah. כדי שלא יטעו בין בינוניים לגדולים. So we don't think that we're making a mistake and looking at a large star and just considering it a medium star. ולכך, לגבי קריאת שמע, פסק השולחן ערוך, regarding Shema, the ruling of Shulchan Aruch, דבעינן לכתחילה כוכבים קטנים. He tells us, technically, if you do to say Shema properly at night, it has to be after the small stars are out. ומכל מקום בדיעבד, ודאי דאם קרא בכוכבים בינוניים יסע. But b'di'abad, of course, if he read the Shema after the three medium stars came out, it's okay. כמו שכתב בספר בין השמשות. וכן בשאר מילי דאורייתא. And in any other case of the Oraita, let's say on the night of Sukkot, you have to eat bread in the Sukkah when it's definitely nighttime. You need small stars. And then on the night of Pesach, to make Kiddush, it has to be also when it's definitely nighttime. So after the three small stars. And we're going to explain more of that as we move forward. He brings us now to the third level of Ketanim Virisufim. They have to be small stars and they have to be together in a cluster or in a row. And he tells you, Le'anyan Mosseri Shabbat, Mosseri Yom Tov, Mosseri Yom Kippurim. Different case. Now we moved up to a higher level, if you will, of the Oraita. Kataba Bit Yosef. So Maran, Rabbi Yosef Karo in the Bit Yosef writes, De la sage b'shelosha kochabim ketanim. It's not enough to have just three small stars. Hagam sheheve laila v'day, even though it is definitely night. Mikol makom mishum tosefet Shabbat. Here's your tosefet Joe. Okay. Mishum tosefet Shabbat. بعينا لحقوت عاد شيوها شلوشا كوخابيم لسوفيم. We wait not till we just have three small stars, but we make sure those three small stars are clustered together or in a row. That means we waited longer to see such a grouping. וזהו תוספת מחול על הקודש, and that is our תוספת. We're adding from the hol to the Kodesh. We're taking time that is definitely not Shabbat, and we're adding it to our Shabbat time. That's our Tosefet. And this is the ruling of Shulchan Aruch. So now we explain that we have three types of stars. And this goes against those who think you could just say, I traversed three quarters of a meal, and this is my time period of 13.5 minutes or 18 minutes or 24 minutes, and that's enough. None of that is enough. You have to have stars in their different positions. Any questions or comments so far?
No.
We're good? All right. Who's still here with us anyway? All right. Let's continue. All right. Ziman said to Kochabim Birushalayim. Now he wants to talk about the time that the stars come out in Yerushalayim. Hine Besefer Debrei Yosef Schwartz. There was a famous Rabbi Yosef Schwartz who was in Yerushalayim, and he wrote a lot about different things that he saw in Yerushalayim. And one of the things he wrote about was about the stars, the sun, what time Shabbat and holidays begin, what time it ends, etc. And he writes, Katab, Shezeman Seta Kochabim, Bime Nisan V'Tishri, Ketanim, Arba'im, Dakin, Ahara Sheki'a, Ubenonim, 28 Dakin. So he said, he's based upon his observations in Yerushalayim. We're talking about approximately 150 or so years ago, okay? A little longer than that. Maybe it's already about 160, 165 years ago, that the small stars during Nisan and Tishri, so we're talking about the spring equinox and the fall equinox, approximately. Okay, we're talking about, think about it as April and September. Small stars 40 minutes after, and medium stars 28 minutes after. Ulfize, Bakayis huyoter miken, and therefore in the summer it's got to be even more than that. Vehagarim Tukochinsky. Okay, there was a Rabbi Tukochinsky, very, very famous rabbi, who wrote extensively about the calendar and the different times. And he also was in Yerushalayim. Vehagarim Tukochinsky, Hesigo b'Sefro Ben Hashemashot. He wrote a book called Ben Hashemashot, and he basically attacked what Rabbi Yosef Schwartz said. Bechatab, Shizeman Zehu Limei HaKayis HaArukim. He goes, no, Rabbi Schwartz is writing about the very, very long days of summer. Abal, Benisan v'Tishri, in actuality, in Nisan and Tishri, the small stars you already see at 32 minutes, and the medium ones at 22, 23 minutes. Olinyan Benonim, Ken Katab Gam Besefer HaNebreshet. And regarding the medium stars about 22, 23 minutes, there's another book called Sefer HaNebreshet, which I'm not familiar with, and he writes the same thing over there, 22, 23 minutes. ובגיליון הלוח שבסוף הספר, והוא בא גם בספר וזרח השמש, ובתיקון נברשת דף ל"ז, and it appears in a few places. וקרוב לזה כתב מעשה ניסים בהקדמתו. מעשה ניסים is a very interesting book by Rabbi Nisim Kaduri. Nisim Kaduri, not Nisim, hold on, let me pull it out here. Yeah, Nisim Azra Kaduri. He wrote a very interesting book of Hidushim and Halachot, Shalut Shabbat, but he also wrote at length about the calendar over there. And what does he write over there? And very similar to this, Rabbi Kaduri wrote in his introduction. Shebekayitz, Ketanim Havu Mim Ubenunim Kafhet. In the summertime, you need 40 minutes for the small ones and 28 for the small ones. But in the winter, you already have the small ones at 35 and the medium at 25. Shemirat Shabbat Kedchata, the most famous Ashkenazi book on Hilchot Shabbat, writes the same thing. Beshem Hagaon Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, which is, one of the great rabbis of Yerushalayim. שהמנהג להחשיב לילה ודאי לעניין מילה 25 dakin. And so the custom in Yerushalayim is, if you want to figure out for a Friday night what time when a child is born to know to do the milah or not, they follow 25 minutes, which means 25 minutes for medium stars. Ube'or de Sion, okay, Rabbi Ben Sion Abba Shaul, Katab, Shehu 27 dakin. He writes 27 minutes. وليان كوخيون كتانيم وسشبات يبار هبان ودعيل مهارات بشيم مهارات بني ما كاف حييم شكادبو شيعول هم ممدكين أحار الشكياع وليان كوخيون بدونيم فاب بن إشحاي شيعولين زاخ دكين أحار الشكياع. Okay, so now he follows what the Ben Ishai is saying, 27 minutes. ואופק בבל כמעט כאל ישראל כידוע. Now here's the problem. He is going upon the assumption that the horizon of Iraq, of Baghdad, technically, is very similar to that of Jerusalem. And I don't know how true that is. Okay, there's definitely, again, because Yerushalayim is a mountain, that automatically changes its configuration. Keep that in mind. We have to see. I want to read this parenthesis here. وبكاف حيين سمان شين لمد ألف ولمد هي شكل هاش بينونيم هم ممدكة بلودك ما شيء بي شام سمان ليس مخ ألف هتام الشعور بكتنيم بدخاخ ممدك أباب ميلا الشعور بينونيم كذا. أوكي. وبقام يقول كده عيد عنيان دينا بقايس يش لهوروش كتنيم بالسوفين مسشبات زمانام بمدكين بنيم كف حيد دكين. Okay. So basically, he's going again with 40 minutes for small, 28 for medium. Back and forth, it's the same numbers that we're seeing. but he's just trying to solidify his case. וכתנים שאינם מסופים, לא נתבהרו הפוסקים. But three small stars that are not clustered together, we don't find out about from any of these sources. But based upon the times that we have for the small and the medium, that means these stars have to be anywhere from 35 to 37 minutes after sunset. שזהו בערך ג' עד ה' דקין לתוספת. שזהו שיעור מועט שכתב משנה ברורה בסימן רש צדי ג' סעיף קטן ה' וכן כתב האור הציון ברפיח לעניין תוספת שבת ששיעורון מקילין. Okay, so Rabbi Ben Sion Bashaul tells you if you want to be mekil, yeah, you could follow that opinion of 35 to 7 minutes. בג' דקות, וכי יוסף בו כתב היעבס בסידורו בית יעקב, דף קל"ו, עמוד ב' שיעור ג' דקין, וכתב בתוספת שבת, סימן עשה שהתוספת לשבת היא כמו הזמן שיהיה מוסף שבת, בין כוכבים קטנים לסופים, שהוא מדין לתוספת, היינו ג' דקין. בספר גט מקושט, המהר"ית נבון כתב שיעור התוספת מוסף שבת הוא רביע מיל, והיינו דין למחסה דקין, עיין בזה בכל דיו סימן י"א באריכות. That's basically the custom in Yerushalayim in old days was to only add about another 4.5 minutes for Tosefet at the end of Shabbat, and that was as a Humrah. I think at this point I lost most of you because it's too many small details and we're getting nowhere. Am I wrong? Am I right? Anything to say here?
You got 5 more minutes to 11 o'clock.
Yeah, 5 minutes. That's all I want. 5 more minutes and we're going to end it. Now, ולגבי חישוב זמן סט הכוכבים, יש להבהיר כמה דברים. So now, he's telling me, how did I come up and calculate the time for סט הכוכבים? So first we have מעשה ניסים, the book of Rabbi Kaduri. כתב שברוב השנה סט הכוכבים שווה, ורק לקראת ימי הקיץ הזמן הולך מתאחר. But most of the year it's similar, okay, but only in the summer months does it get much later. What he been on the Shamisiut Enakin. He goes, but elsewhere I wrote that that's, in reality that's not true. Shimeh Hanesh B'Nisan Kesarim Mitebet B'Chaf Chelek Acharim B'Tebet Mitahid Yotim B'Nisan. Mosh Katav Hagarim B'Kuchinsky B'Tamashihot Sham Shemisiman Hazma Shebenisan Hazeman Chaser B'Mini Tebet. ועוד שינוי יש ביניהם, כי במעשה ניסים עשה הפרש בכוכבים כבינונים בין הקיסר והארוך בג' דקים ושמשוב ונרשת. So basically he disagrees with all the calculations for סט הכוכבים of Rabbi Kaduri. הפרש של עד ו' דקים, וכן בקדים ושמשוב עשה עד ח' דקים. והשיעור לידע בדיוק האמת עם מי, יש ללכת בזה אחר המעלות. He goes, now, so really, if you really want to know the truth, we can't listen to any of these charts or any of these lists. We must follow scientific degrees. So just straight out. והיינו, שנראה כמה מעלות השמש מתחת לאופק ביום הארוך בקיץ. Because we have to see how many degrees beneath, how many is the sun beneath the horizon on the longest day of summer. In other words, we know June 20th approximately. she'az beketanim hashi'ur muskam. And we know that according to all the sources we looked at, everybody seems to say that the small stars is agreed upon at 40 minutes. Ubebenunim kafhet, and the medium ones at 28. And based upon the degrees of that day, and based upon the degrees of such a day, we could then calculate the precise degree for the entire year. And he tells you, Vehu 8.9 ma'alot lekochavim ketanim. That works out to 8.9 degrees for small stars, the 6.8 the binunim, and 6.8 for medium stars. ועל פי זה, ההפרש בביnunim בין 4 דקות ובקטנים בין 6 דקות. וזהו הממוצע שבין בית השיטות וסקיד הער. And this gives us the time that we were figuring out before and looking at. And Rabbi Zilber in his Birur Hadacha basically came up with the same conclusion. The rest of it has nothing to do with us. Okay? Basically, he said this is the way we were able to figure out our times. And we'd be able to use the same type of degree system for any place else based upon what we know about this. If this is the type of degrees that we would have to use for Yerushalayim based upon the eyewitness testimony over the course of the last 150 or so years, so now we know that this is the time where the stars come out, and we should be able to use the same thing whether we're going from this city to the next city or any place else. Now, let's say this is correct. Let's say we're looking at really 8.9 degrees. Do you think people are ready to switch?
No.
No, nobody wants to hear about it. Everybody wants to seem to end Shabbat as quickly as possible. Whereas if you heard Solomon before, nobody was rushing. Nobody was rushing. Not in Yerushalayim, they weren't rushing to end Shabbat. And not even over here, 50, 60 years ago, they just looked in the sky. When they saw the stars, they saw the stars. Nobody was rushing it. Nowadays, we just want to end everything. So if we came out with a calendar now based upon 8.9 degrees throughout the year, and it ended up being, close to Rabbi Feinstein's 50 minutes, or possibly even more, can we tolerate such a thing? Would we follow such a thing? I'm going to leave you with that as food for thought, and we'll come back to the next class. Any questions before we sign off?
Joey, I had one thing to add. I think 2 weeks ago, I asked you if there are any communities who follow Rabbenu Tam for the start of Shabbat.
So that would mean starting Shabbat after sunset.
Right.
Based upon the mistaken notion of understanding of Rabbenu Tam.
All right. So I did a little bit of an internet search.
Okay.
And I didn't find much on it, but I did find a couple of places that had mentioned that the Satmar Hasidim, or many Hasidic groups in Europe, used to start Shabbat later than sunset.
Right.
And when they came to America, Rav Moshe Feinstein told them that they should change their custom and start at sunset, and that was what they agreed to do.
Right.
That's Shabbat. But for prayer, I know that Hasidim wait for nightfall to say Mincha.
That's true.
I know.
That's true. I don't know if all the Satmar or all the groups throughout the world agree with what you just said, Nisim.
Yeah, I'm not saying.
I've definitely come across similar things. Yes, I have. I most definitely have discussed it briefly last time, and there are definitely cases of Hasidim, starting Shabbat after Shabbat has started. I don't know how to justify it.
Yeah, they also mentioned that Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote in one of his tshuvot that for the Rabbanan, with great need, you can do the melacha till 72 minutes.
After sunset on Friday night.
Yeah. I didn't see it. I didn't see it myself, but that's what somebody quoted.
No, doesn't sound. That does not sound like any of the rules of Rav Moshe Feinstein, because he definitely felt that Shabbat started, at sunset.
You headed out?
There was no way.
All right, I'll see if I can find it.
All right. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night, and God will meet again next week.